You've been taught that fairness is noble, that honor wins in the end, that good people finish first. But as you sit there, watching others climb over you with a smile, you're beginning to suspect the truth. You've been playing a rigged game with imaginary rules. The world promised you that integrity would be rewarded, yet here you are passed over, overlooked, while those who bend the rules sit in positions you deserve. Tonight, we strip away the comfortable delusions. You wake up each morning believing that today will be different, that your hard work will finally be recognized, that your genuine intentions will somehow pierce through the noise and reach the right people. But the right people aren't looking for genuine intentions. They're looking for results that serve their purposes, for allies who understand the unspoken language of power, for players who can navigate the shadows without losing their way. You've been speaking the wrong language this entire time, announcing your moves like a chess player calling out each piece before you touch it. Meanwhile, they've been 3 moves ahead, watching you telegraph your strategy while they execute, theirs in silence. The uncomfortable truth sits heavy in your chest, now that every time you chose transparency over strategy, every time you picked honor over advantage, you handed them another reason to see you as predictable, manageable, safe. And safety, you're beginning to understand, is the enemy of respect. Society sold you a beautiful story about virtue and righteousness, about how the meek shall inherit the earth. But look around you who actually inherits. The meek are still waiting, still believing, still trusting in a system designed to keep them docile. You've been conditioned to see manipulation as evil, strategy as dishonor. But what if these judgments were planted in your mind to keep you weak? What if the very people who taught you these virtues were the ones benefiting from your compliance? They needed you to believe in fairness so you wouldn't question why they always seemed to win. They needed you to trust in eventual justice so you wouldn't demand immediate accountability. They fed you stories about karma and cosmic balance while they carved out their advantages in the real world, where results matter more than righteousness. The meek don't inherit anything, they wait for inheritance, while others take ownership. You've been trained to see ambition as greed, strategic thinking as coldness, self-preservation as selfishness. But these aren't moral failures, they're survival skills that you've been convinced to abandon. Every time you chose to be the bigger person, you made yourself smaller in the eyes of those who matter. Every time you turned the other cheek, you taught them that your boundaries were negotiable, that your respect was optional, that your time was free. Real power operates in shadows, through silence, through what isn't said. While you announce your intentions, true leaders move in darkness, letting others reveal their hands first. Machiavelli understood this power is not about being loved or feared, but about being unpredictable, unknowable. You've been playing checkers while they play chess, revealing your strategy while they study yours. The smartest leaders win before the game begins, positioning themselves where victory is inevitable. They don't fight battles, they create conditions where battles become unnecessary. They don't argue their worth, they demonstrate it through absence, through scarcity, through the strategic withdrawal of their presence, until others remember why they needed them in the first place. You've been exhausting yourself trying to prove your value to people who already decided you were disposable. You've been explaining yourself to those who made up their minds before you opened your mouth. Real power doesn't explain, doesn't justify, doesn't negotiate for basic respect. It simply exists, undeniable and self-evident, requiring no external validation because it validates itself through results. The architecture of power is built on mystery, on the space between what people know and what they assume. You've been filling that space with explanations, with justifications, with desperate attempts to be understood. But understanding is not respect, and clarity is not power. The most influential people in your life maintain an element of unpredictability, keeping you slightly off balance, never quite sure where you stand. This isn't cruelty, it's strategic presence management. You perform goodness like an actor on stage, hoping the audience will applaud your virtue. But power doesn't reward performers. It rewards those who understand that morality is a tool, not a religion. The leaders who rise above you have learned to wear righteousness like a mask, deploying kindness strategically, using compassion as currency. They've discovered what you're afraid to admit, that authentic morality and strategic morality can coexist, that you can be good and still win. Your mistake was believing that being good meant being weak, that having principles meant having no strategy. You turned morality into martyrdom, virtue into victimhood. You convinced yourself that suffering for your beliefs somehow made them more pure, more noble, more worthy of respect. But respect doesn't flow toward martyrs, it flows toward those who can maintain their principles while achieving their objectives. The smartest leaders don't choose between being ethical and being effective. They find ways to be both. They understand that sustainable power requires some foundation of genuine care, some authentic concern for outcomes beyond their own advancement. But they also understand that good intentions without strategic thinking produce nothing but good intentions. They've learned to be genuinely kind in ways that also serve their purposes, to be authentically generous in ways that build lasting alliances, to be honestly principled in ways that strengthen rather than weaken their position. You've been performing virtue for an audience that wasn't watching, hoping that someone, somewhere, was keeping score of your sacrifices. You've been taught that honesty is strength, that openness builds trust. But transparency is the luxury of those who have nothing to lose and everything to prove. True power lies in mystery, in keeping others guessing, in revealing only what serves your purpose. Every secret you share becomes a weapon in someone else's hands. The smartest leaders understand that information is power, and they never give away power for free. You confuse transparency with authenticity, but they're entirely different things. Authenticity is being genuine in your interactions, true to your core values, consistent in your character. Transparency is telling everyone everything, sharing your vulnerabilities with people who haven't earned the right to hold them, offering your weaknesses to those who might use them against you. You can be completely authentic while remaining strategically mysterious. You can be genuinely yourself while controlling what aspects of yourself others get to see. The powerful understand that revelation is a form of intimacy, and intimacy without trust is simply self-harm. They don't lie, they simply don't volunteer information that serves no purpose other than satisfying someone else's curiosity. They've learned to be present without being available, engaged without being accessible, open without being transparent. Your compulsive honesty has trained others to see you as predictable, manageable, safe to ignore because they always know exactly where you stand and what you'll do next. Mystery creates space for others to fill with their own projections, their own assumptions about your capabilities, your connections, your next moves. Loyalty is the chain they placed around your neck, convincing you it was a necklace. You give everything to organizations, relationships, causes that would discard you without hesitation. But observe how true leaders operate. They inspire loyalty without giving it blindly. They earn devotion without becoming devoted. Their allegiance flows toward their own vision, their own mission. They understand that loyalty is not a virtue but a strategic choice, renewed daily based on value and alignment. You've been loyal to people who see loyalty as weakness, to organizations that see dedication as desperation, to causes that see your commitment as proof that they don't need to earn it. Real loyalty is mutual, conditional, and constantly renegotiated based on respect and benefit. It's not a feeling, it's a contract that both parties must honor for it to remain valid. The smartest leaders inspire fierce loyalty precisely because others know that loyalty must be earned and can be lost. Their allegiance is valuable because it's not automatic, not guaranteed, not given away to anyone who asks for it. They understand that unconditional loyalty is worthless because it costs nothing to obtain and nothing to maintain. You've been giving away your most precious resource, your commitment, your time, your emotional investment to people and institutions that never had to work for it. You've confused loyalty with self-abandonment, commitment with self-sacrifice. But true loyalty serves both parties, strengthens both positions, advances both agendas. When loyalty flows in only one direction, it's not loyalty, it's exploitation disguised as virtue. The leaders above you inspire such devotion because they demonstrate through their actions that they're worthy of it, that they'll use it wisely, that they understand its value precisely because they know what it costs to earn, while you rush to fill silence with words, explanations, justifications, the powerful use silence as a weapon. They let others speak first, reveal weaknesses, expose their desperation. Silence creates space for others to project their fears, their assumptions, their need for approval. You've been afraid of quiet moments, uncomfortable with the tension. But silence is where real power lives, in the space between words, in the pause before the decision. Your compulsive need to explain, to clarify, to make sure everyone understands. Your position has trained others to see you as anxious, uncertain, desperate for approval. But power doesn't explain itself, simply exists, undeniable and self-evident. When you speak immediately, you rob yourself of the opportunity to observe, to learn, to let others reveal their true intentions before you reveal yours. Silence makes people uncomfortable, and in their discomfort, they show you exactly who they are. They fill the quiet with their insecurities, their assumptions, their desperate need to be understood and approved of. While they're talking, you're learning about their priorities, their fears, their strategies, their weaknesses. The smartest leaders have learned that the person who speaks first often loses, that the one who shows their cards early rarely wins the hand. They understand that silence is not emptiness, it's possibility, potential, power held in reserve until the perfect moment to deploy it. You've been giving away your position, your strategy, your emotional state with every word. You rush to speak when silence would have served you better. Availability breeds contempt. Scarcity creates value. You've made yourself too accessible, too predictable, too safe. The smartest leaders understand that distance is magnetic, that people desire what they cannot easily obtain. They control their presence like a resource, appearing when it matters, absent when it serves them. Your constant availability has trained others to take you for granted. Power requires the wisdom to withdraw, to let others feel your absence before they can appreciate your presence. You answer every call, respond to every message, attend every meeting, accept every invitation, thinking that accessibility demonstrates dedication, but accessibility without selectivity demonstrates desperation. You've taught everyone around you that your time has no value because you give it away so freely. that your attention costs nothing because it's always available, that your presence is unremarkable because it's always guaranteed. The most influential people in your life carefully manage their availability, making their time feel precious because it is precious, making their attention feel valuable because it is valuable. They understand that presence without absence is like light without darkness, meaningless because there's no contrast, no appreciation, no understanding of what life looks like without it. When you're always available, people stop scheduling you. They assume you're free because you always have been. When you're always responsive, people stop prioritizing their communication with you because they know you'll respond regardless of when they reach out. You've become background noise in other people's lives, a constant that they can ignore because they know you'll still be there when they need you. But power lies in being foreground musics, something people notice, something they miss when it's gone, something they actively seek out because they can't take it for granted. Reality is not what happens, it's what people believe happened. While you focus on doing good work, others focus on controlling the narrative. They understand that perception shapes reality, that the story people tell themselves about you matters more than your actual actions. You've been naive about image management, thinking that results speak for themselves. But results are meaningless if no one sees them, understands them, or remembers them correctly. The smartest leaders know that managing perception is not manipulation, it's communication. They understand that people don't experience your work directly. They experience their interpretation of your work, filtered through their biases, their assumptions, their existing beliefs about who you are and what you're capable of. You've been letting others control your narrative, allowing them to define your contributions, your character, your value. You've assumed that good work creates good reputation automatically. But reputation is crafted, curated, carefully constructed through consistent messaging and strategic positioning. Every interaction shapes how others see you, and if you're not conscious about that shaping, others will do it for you and they won't do it in your favor. They'll interpret your humility as insecurity, your thoroughness as inefficiency, your collaboration as inability to work independently. The story they tell about you becomes the truth that others accept, regardless of what actually happened. You've been focused on being right, while others focused on being understood, on being remembered, on being seen as valuable. Truth without strategic presentation is just noise in a world full of competing narratives. You've confused being liked with being respected. But respect is earned through boundaries, not kindness. The leaders above you have learned that fear and respect are intimately connected, not fear of cruelty, but fear of consequences, fear of disappointing someone whose opinion matters. They've mastered the delicate balance of being approachable, enough to inspire trust, but distant enough to maintain mystique. Respect flows toward those who respect themselves enough to demand it. Your desperate need to be liked has made you unlikable in the way that matters most. You've become predictable, manageable, safe to ignore. The people you most want to impress respect others precisely because those others don't seem to need their approval. Respect is granted to those who have standards, who maintain boundaries, who don't negotiate their core requirements for acceptance or approval. You've been willing to compromise anything to avoid conflict, to prevent disappointment, to keep peace. But peace without respect is just prolonged surrender. The smartest leaders create respectful distance. They're warm but not desperate, available but not needy, kind but not self-sacrificing. They understand that respect and affection can coexist. But respect must come first, because affection without respect is meaningless. When people respect you, they think before they speak to you. They prepare before they meet with you. They consider your time valuable and your opinion worth seeking. When people merely like you, they treat you like entertainment, like comfort. Food, like something pleasant, but ultimately forgettable. You've been optimizing for the wrong metric, measuring success by how comfortable others feel around you rather than how seriously they take you. Understanding these truths comes with a cost. You can never return to the comfortable innocence of believing in fairness. You now see the game being played around you. The strategic moves disguised as coincidences, the calculated kindness masquerading as genuine care. This knowledge is both liberation and burden. You must choose. Remain comfortable in your illusions or embrace the uncomfortable power of seeing clearly. The smartest leaders made this choice long ago. There's a moment in everyone's development when they realize that the world they believed in, the one where good intentions matter more than results, where fairness eventually prevails, where virtue is automatically rewarded, doesn't exist. This realization feels like loss because it is loss. You're losing the comforting belief that someone, somewhere, is keeping score of your goodness, that your sacrifices are being noted and will eventually be repaid. You're losing the naive trust that others operate from the same moral framework. You do that, they share your assumptions about how people should treat each other. But what you gain in exchange for this loss is infinitely more valuable. You gain the ability to see what's actually happening instead of what you hope is happening. You gain the power to respond to reality instead of your fantasies about reality. You gain the strategic awareness that allows you to protect yourself, advance your interests, and build genuine influence based on clear understanding rather than wishful thinking. Your transformation begins with a simple recognition. You are the sovereign of your own existence. No one is coming to save you. No one is keeping score of your goodness. No one will reward your patience with anything but more waiting. The smartest leaders win because they've accepted full responsibility for their outcomes, because they've stopped expecting the world to play by rules that only they follow. Your power lies not in changing the game, but in learning to play it masterfully. Sovereignty means understanding that you are both the author and the protagonist of your own story, that every choice you make either strengthens or weakens your position, that every interaction either advances or undermines your objectives. You cannot control how others behave, but you can control how you respond to their behavior. You cannot force the world to be fair, but you can stop handicapping yourself by expecting fairness. You cannot make others respect you, but you can start respecting yourself enough to demand better treatment. The sovereign self doesn't wait for permission to be powerful. It takes responsibility for creating power through strategic thinking, consistent action, and relentless focus on results that matter. You stop being a victim of circumstances and become the architect of circumstances. You stop reacting to life and start creating life. You stop hoping for better and start building better. This is not about becoming cold or cruel, it's about becoming effective while remaining authentic, strategic while staying principled, powerful while preserving your humanity. The smartest leaders understand that true power serves something greater than itself, but it must first exist before it can serve. Your awakening begins now, with the recognition that you have always been responsible for your own outcomes, and now you finally have the clarity to do something about it. You believed that truth would reveal itself, that good work would shine through the noise, that authenticity would cut through the carefully constructed facades around you. You believed in the myth of meritocracy, that the best ideas, the strongest efforts, the purest intentions would naturally rise to the surface. But you've been living in a world that doesn't exist. Reality is not what happens. Reality is what people believe happened. And while you've been focused on doing the work, others have been focused on controlling the story. They understand something you've been blind to. Perception shapes reality far more than reality shapes perception. The story people tell themselves about you, about your actions, about your worth, that story matters infinitely more than your actual accomplishments. Watch how this works. Two people perform the same task with identical results. One presents it poorly, buried in humility and self-doubt. The other frames it as revolutionary, speaks with confidence, controls the narrative around their contribution. Guess who gets remembered? Guess who gets promoted? Guess who shapes the next conversation? You've been naive about image management, thinking that results speak for themselves. But results are silent. They sit there, inert, waiting for someone to give them meaning, to place them in context, to tell the world what they should think about them. You've handed that power to others. You've let them decide what your work means, what your efforts represent, what your presence contributes. The manipulators understand this instinctively. They craft their image as carefully as they craft their work, often more carefully. They know that being right isn't enough. Being effective isn't enough. Being valuable isn't enough. You must also be seen as right, as effective, as valuable. And being seen requires intention, strategy, control. They control the timing of their revelations. They choose their moments, their audience, their framing. They understand that the same accomplishment can be perceived as genius or mediocrity depending on how it's presented, when it's revealed, and who gets to shape the initial reaction. You've been playing by rules that don't exist, while others play by rules you refuse to acknowledge. You thought substance would triumph over style, that depth would defeat surface presentation. But you're competing in a game where perception is the primary battleground. And you've been fighting with your eyes closed. The story of your life is being written by others because you've refused to pick up the pen. Every day you remain invisible, others define your visibility. Every moment you stay silent about your contributions, others fill that silence with their own interpretations, or worse, with forgetting. This isn't about deception. This isn't about lying or manipulation in the traditional sense. This is about understanding that reality and perception are two different games, and success requires mastery of both. The truth doesn't market itself. Excellence doesn't announce itself. Value doesn't advocate for itself. You must. You've been chasing the wrong currency. All this time you've been collecting smiles and pleasant exchanges, mistaking them for something valuable. You've confused being liked with being respected, and that confusion has cost you everything that matters. Likability is cheap, freely given, easily withdrawn. Respect is earned through something far more difficult. Boundaries. Watch the people above you, the ones who command rooms with their presence, whose words carry weight, whose decisions go unquestioned. They didn't climb there by being everyone's friend. They didn't ascend by making themselves endlessly available, endlessly agreeable, endlessly safe. They understood what you're only beginning to grasp. Respect flows toward those who respect themselves enough to demand it. The leaders you admire have mastered something you've been afraid to acknowledge. They've learned that fear and respect are intimately connected, not fear of cruelty or violence, but fear of consequences, fear of disappointing someone whose opinion has become valuable, fear of losing access to someone who doesn't give their attention freely. They've weaponized scarcity in the most sophisticated way possible. They've made themselves scarce. Look at how they operate. They're approachable enough to inspire trust, but distant enough to maintain mystique. They give enough of themselves to keep people invested, but never so much that they become taken for granted. They've mastered the delicate balance between warmth and boundary, between availability and exclusivity. You've been giving yourself away like free samples at a grocery store, wondering why no one values what you offer. You've made yourself so accessible, so predictable, so eager to please that you've eliminated the very tension that creates respect. You've removed the possibility of disappointing people, and in doing so, you've removed the possibility of mattering. To them, respect requires the implicit understanding that it can be withdrawn, that your approval isn't guaranteed, that your time, attention, and energy are finite resources that must be earned, not assumed. The moment you become unconditionally available, you become conditionally valuable. The people who command respect understand this instinctively. They don't explain themselves constantly. They don't apologize for their standards. They don't negotiate their boundaries down to make others comfortable. They simply exist as they are, take up the space they deserve, and let others adjust to that reality. You've been afraid of seeming difficult, afraid of creating friction, afraid of making demands. But difficulty is just another word for having standards. Friction is just another word for having substance. Making demands is just another word for knowing your worth and refusing to accept less. The paradox cuts deeper than you imagined. The more you've tried to be likable, the less respectable you've become. The more accommodating you've been, the less accommodated you've felt. The more you've given, the less you've received. You've been operating under the assumption that kindness creates reciprocity. But kindness without boundaries creates entitlement. Those who respect themselves create a gravitational pull. People are drawn to those who seem to have something they cannot easily access, something that must be earned rather than freely given. They understand that humans value what costs them something: time, effort, proof of worthiness. You must stop being everyone's first option and start being someone's only option. Stop being the safe choice and start being the right choice. Stop being available and start being valuable. The shift requires more than changing your behavior, requires changing your fundamental relationship with your own worth. Respect begins the moment you stop asking for it and start expecting it. Understanding these truths comes with a cost that no one prepared you for. You can never return to the comfortable innocence of believing in fairness, in the myth that good things happen to good people, in the fantasy that the world operates on the principles you were taught as a child. That door has closed behind you. Forever, you now see the game being played around you with crystalline clarity. The strategic moves disguised as coincidences. The calculated kindness masquerading as genuine care. The manufactured urgencies designed to keep you reactive rather than strategic. The compliments that come with invisible strings attached. The opportunities offered with hidden costs. The relationships that exist only as long as you remain useful. Every interaction has become transparent. You can see the mechanics behind the smiles, the agenda behind the small talk, the positioning behind the pleasantries. You understand now why certain conversations happen in certain moments, why specific people suddenly become interested in your projects, why opportunities appear and disappear with suspicious timing. This knowledge is both liberation and burden. Liberation because you can finally stop taking things personally that were never about you. Liberation because you can stop blaming yourself for outcomes that were determined by forces you couldn't control. Liberation because you can finally play the game with full awareness instead of stumbling through it. Blindfolded, but the burden is real, the burden of seeing people as they are rather than as you hoped they would be. The burden of recognizing that most relationships exist on a spectrum of mutual use rather than mutual care. The burden of understanding that the world you believed in, the meritocratic, fair, just world, exists only in your imagination. You must choose. You must choose right now, in this moment of clarity, whether you will embrace this uncomfortable power of seeing clearly or retreat into the comfortable delusion of willful blindness. Whether you will use this knowledge to finally play the game effectively or pretend you never learned the rules. The choice is not between good and evil. The choice is between naive and strategic, between reactive and proactive, between hoping things will change and changing things yourself, between being a participant in your own life and being a victim of other people's plans. The smartest leaders made this choice long ago. They looked at the same evidence you're looking at now and decided that understanding reality was more valuable than maintaining illusions. They chose effectiveness over innocence. They chose influence over idealism. They chose to shape the game rather than be shaped by it. They made peace with the fact that pure motives are rare, that most actions serve multiple purposes, that even genuine relationships contain elements of mutual benefit. They stopped waiting for people to love them unconditionally and started creating conditions where people would find it beneficial to treat them well. They learned to see manipulation not as evil but as influence, not as deception but as strategy, not as betrayal but as the natural order of human interaction. They stopped judging the game and started winning it. You're standing at the same crossroads they once faced. You can continue to believe that playing fair will eventually pay off, that being good will eventually be rewarded, that the universe has some cosmic sense of justice that will recognize your virtue and compensate your sacrifice. Or you can accept that the universe is indifferent to your suffering, and your success depends entirely on your willingness to create it yourself. The old you is dying. The version of yourself that believed in fairy tales and happy endings and cosmic justice is dissolving before your eyes. In its place, something harder and more real is being born. Something that can navigate the world as it actually is, rather than as it should be. This transformation is not optional. The moment you truly see, you cannot unsee. The moment you truly understand, you cannot unknow. The only choice left is how you will use this knowledge, whether it will make you bitter or strategic, whether it will paralyze you or liberate you, whether it will be the beginning of your ascent or the confirmation of your defeat. The price of awakening is the loss of innocence. The reward is the gain of power. Choose wisely.